Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome, everybody, to Nightlight. So glad you could join me today because I've got a really, really super guest with me. First, though, I do want to thank Ken Quiethawk for his introduction. Please check him out on the Internet. He's a native storyteller, and he and his wife have been preserving a way of sharing history and cosmology through and over time that is not used today, and a much better way of sharing history with generations that will carry it forward because they do it through story instead of a book. Of course, books now are almost antiques, horribly so. But so my guest today is Paul LaViolette. He is the president of the Starburst Foundation and Interdisciplinary Research Institute and holds advanced degrees in systems science and physics. He's the author of Genesis of the Cosmos, Subquantum Kinetics, and the book we're going to be talking about, or at least starting with tonight, Earth Under Fire, Humanity's Survival of the Ice Age. Many ancient myths from around the world tell of catastrophic destruction by fire and flood. These ubiquitous legends are so extreme that they're often dismissed as imaginative exaggerations. In his book, Paul connects these myths to recent scientific findings in astronomy, geology, and archaeology, to reconstruct the details of prehistoric global disasters and to explain how similar tragedies could occur in the near future. Compelled by his decryption of an ancient warning hidden in zodiac constellation lore, he worked with information from many scientific sources, including astronomical observations, polar ice core measurements, and other geological data, to confirm that our galaxy's core exploded near the end of the last ice age. This explosion unleashed a barrage of cosmic rays and enveloped the solar system in a dense nebula, which led to periods of persistent darkness, frigid cold, severe solar storms, searing heat, and mountainous floods that plagued mankind for many generations. Linking his scientific findings to details preserved in the myths and momentous and moments of ancient civilization, he demonstrates how past civilizations accurately recorded the causes of these cataclysmic events, knowledge of which may be crucial for the human race to survive the next catastrophe, superwave cycle. This information reveals the intelligence and integrity of our ancestors who, when faced with extinction, found the means to warn us that the apocalypse that destroyed them could occur once more. You're going to find his book, once more, it is Earth Under Fire, Humanity's Survival of the Ice Age, enlightening, inspirational, thought-provoking, and really something that all of us really should pay attention to because there's great validity in it, and you don't need to to believe all of it, but be inspired by some of it anyhow. You can find his website at www.etheric.com. Welcome to the show, Paul. I'm so glad you're here.
Hello, Barbara. I really liked your introduction.
Oh, well, thank you. Your book was so amazing. I found myself going, well, of course, that's logical. That's, oh my gosh, why has no one else ever made these connections? You not only made the connections, you verified them scientifically, which I think is fascinating, but what started you on this? What inspired you to do this kind of a journey, this kind of an investigation or a searching for purpose and cause, so to speak?
Well, I deciphered a message that was encoded in star lore. And I was at the time a doctoral student at Portland State University. And at that time I was planning to work on a new physics theory I had developed called subquantum kinetics, which makes a major revision of all aspects of physics, and so far has had 14 of its predictions confirmed, whereas Einstein had only 4 predictions confirmed. And at that time, it was in the early stages of developing that theory, and I thought that was going to be my topic for my dissertation. And as I was working on this, it got me into astronomy, because the physics theory was predicting stuff in astronomy and cosmology. So I had all these books I was checking out of the library on astronomy and so on. And I also had an interest in stellar mythology at the time. While this was going on, I had discovered that the physics I was working on was encoded in astrology, in the zodiac. Metaphorically. In other words, each of the 12 zodiac signs expresses a principle of nature, you could think. And together they explain how matter came into being. And this is totally different from standard physics. The Big Bang Theory has been disproved. I disproved it in 1986 in a paper I wrote, and many other people have written papers showing that the expanding universe concept is incorrect. So the question is now that, well, the thing is that astronomers keep going forward ignoring those facts and keep teaching the Big Bang Theory as if nothing ever happened. Because if the Big Bang Theory fell, it would be a major crisis for astronomy. Because what do you replace it with? How was the universe then created? And the cosmology presented in my theory, subquantum kinetics, is that the universe is continuously created. There was not a single explosion in the past, but an emergence, almost like more of a similar to nature of seeds forming matter, creating more matter, seeds coming out in space, and like fluctuations of the 0 point, spawning particles like neutrons, which form protons and electrons, spontaneously in space in a distributed fashion. And in fact, I have a video that's on my website on etheric.com called Parthenogenesis, and it describes this whole evolution of the universe from this perspective. So as I was doing this, I found that the concepts were encoded in the zodiac, which, that statement itself is mind-blowing. It showed to me that the physics that I had discovered, which was based on systems theory, new findings that were coming out in chemical reaction systems that produce order, this is at one point I called this the alchemic ether theory because it is more similar to the ancient Chinese concept of the qi that transmutes from yin to yang. These are important concepts in it, but they're completely scientifically based. It's a complete different approach to physics. But I had also found it, for example, encoded in the tarot. And so this meant was that I wasn't the first to develop that. Here we are in the 20th, 21st century. This was in 20th. This all happened in between 77. I first got the idea in 73. 77, I started developing it in the doctoral program, 76, 77. And at that time, I realized, this was such an important physics that they took the trouble to encode it not only in the tarot, in the zodiac, astrological zodiac, but in some of the major creation myths, like the story of Atum, ancient Egyptian story, also the story of Osiris, the story of Babylonian creation epic, the story of Zeus, the ancient Greek story. So all your major creation myths symbolically encode these concepts. And they were trying to, it was sort of like trying to pass it down through the generations. In other words, they put these ideas, which are very technical. I mean, if they wouldn't have had any chance of being passed down if they had some technical book that they were asking everyone to read every generation. Instead, they put it in the form of myths and lores, stories about the stars, fortune-telling cards, where people would learn to tell fortunes, but the principles actually were secretly encoding this physics. And this was their way of being able to pass the lore from one generation to another, and the myths about what had happened in the past, the catastrophes of the past, were passed this way. So what I found is here I was attracted to the star lore of astrology because I'd seen it was coded, but not just encoded. It was encoded in a special way. It was designed as an anti-cryptogram. Now, let me explain what that means. With a cryptogram, you have a coded message where you have the key and you don't give the key out. You keep it secret. And only the person you tend to receive it, like your other military force or whatever, has the key to decipher it. In an anti-cryptogram, you give the key with the cryptogram, so the person receiving it can decode it. And that's used in extraterrestrial communication, for example. We did that with the Pioneer 10 space capsule message. And it was the same principles, anti-cryptography is called, I found in the zodiac. You have the key. In this case, the key is, there's two keys. The tarot is one key because that gives the correct order of the principles, of the concepts. The other key is the Sphinx. So here you get into the whole idea, what is the riddle of the Sphinx that we've heard about? Well, the riddle is, take me and solve my puzzle, because the puzzle is the zodiac. The mystery is, what is the secret the zodiac encodes? And that's what I was captured by. It's sort of like finding this incredible thing. It's sort of like discovering an artifact that nobody else has found. I was the first to find this. Here I'm a student, PhD student, in Portland, Oregon. And it's the kind of stuff you tell your friends. You go to the local coffee shop there, or Galleria or wherever, and I'm filling them in on the latest discoveries. It was really an exhilarating time for me. All these discoveries, one after another. It was like compressing decades of work into a few years, the way it seemed to me. I was going, it took me a whole 7 years to get my degree, by the way, working just 4 years on my dissertation. Most people do in 2 years, but I was more focused on this important discovery. And the thing that really got me into the superwave concept was I noticed that in this zodiac message, which is an anti-cryptogram, and when you decipher the cryptogram, you reorder the signs, okay? And when you've reordered the zodiac signs into a new order, their polarities and qualities create a new pattern. And that's the idea of opening a safe, as if you get a click. And that's the indication that you got it right, and you can figure the chances are 1 in so many billions that it was due to chance to be that way. So then it means you got the message, and then you see, okay, it's accurately encoding this physics, and right where it's the idea of matter and energy spontaneously emerging. And right at the point where it begins to emerge, in that Scorpio and Sagittarius principles, right there is where you have the breakthrough into physical form of matter and energy. And it can be even explosive in some cases, like what happens in the centers of galaxies. Mm-hmm. Right there, my attention was taken to a myth, an ancient Greek myth of Scorpio shooting, the archer, Sagittarius, shooting his arrow at the heart of the scorpion. He's taking aim to shoot his arrow. And the heart of the scorpion is Antares, and the arrow in Sagittarius is marked in the constellation. There's an actual arrow there, has a tip of an arrow star. So I said, what the heck? Well, what I first noticed was, hey, here's Scorpio with his stinger pointing upwards and Sagittarius with his arrow, and they're pointing at something. And I was looking on the map, and here I was looking that here's the center of the galaxy. I said, this is amazing. But by the way, am I coming through clear? Because I hear a little static.
It almost sounds like you're too close to the microphone.
Okay, is that maybe better?
Yep.
Yeah, put it out there. Okay. So, like I was saying, so here, what I did, and let me put it maybe up more here. Okay. So I plotted the trajectory of the arrow. At this point, I was saying that, hey, this is very interesting. Because I noted the arrow wasn't pointing at the heart of the scorpion; it was off. But I noticed that these stars, they move over time. Nothing is still in the heavens. And I started studying astrometry, it's called. It's how stars move. They move at certain rates in the sky. Each star has its own direction of movement and rate. So I regressed all the stars in those constellations back in time, and I found that the arrow, Sagittarius arrow indicator, progressively rose and rose until he was aimed at the heart of the scorpion. And that occurred on a specific date. And that date was 15,870 years ago. And I was wondering, hey, this is interesting. They're marking a date, and here's the idea of energy and matter explosively coming into being. And I thought, could they have been talking about a galactic core explosion, trying to let us know that the core of our galaxy had exploded at that time? We see these going on in other galaxies, but now remember, I was doing this back in the 70s. 1978, was making this discovery, and very little was known about core explosions. At that time, they still thought quasars were star-like objects in space. Later, with the Hubble telescope, they found that they're galaxies whose cores have become so bright they mask the whole galaxy. In other words, there are extreme cases of galactic core explosions. So,
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. You talk about a core explosion, and the center of our galaxy has always been the same center. So does it regenerate so that it explodes again and again over, I don't know, millions of years?
It doesn't fragment. Let's say maybe explosion is not the best, but that's what the word is used for it.
Kind of like a
they
sunspot.
Call it active.
So that
think of it as active core state. Yeah.
Okay, so it's like sunspots where they every now and then send out, eruptions of sorts.
Think of a flare of the sun. Yeah.
Okay.
Except in this case, the whole star flares. Now remember, I don't say black hole. I'm referring to this as a star. It's a mother star. It's what gives birth to our galaxy. 99% of the matter that's in our galaxy, the stars and so on, came from expulsions from the center of our galaxy. And slowly they're discovering this to be the case. And it totally is mind-boggling for physicists. They can't understand how this happens, that these active cores is a better way to put it. In other words, their intensity jumps from, let's say, what ours is putting out, which is what they call quiescent state. It's before an outburst. When it goes to the outburst, it can go up 1 million times in luminosity, and even more in some cases. And this can happen just like that in the flash of it's just like a gamma ray flash. Suddenly in microseconds it'll be at one point and then go. And we've seen this happen in other galaxies where the core output looked like a quiescent galaxy, and suddenly puts out this gamma ray flash, but the thing does not subside. It keeps going. And for 3 days, it's going really gangbusters, and then it comes down about a few orders of magnitude, but it's still really putting out the energy, and, it's what you would call a Seifert or almost quasar-like state. And that would have been the case of,
Yeah, so that creates a superwave.
Exactly, and I eventually came to form the idea of a superwave, and I'll explain what triggered those concepts, because they involve not only stellar mythology, which I'll talk about, how that was encoded, but also extraterrestrial communication. I deciphered a message being sent to us that was encoded in what are called pulsars. I'll get into that in a bit. But let me say that the core of the galaxy, physicists will call it a black hole, but it's not. And if you go to my website, I have one or two postings where, this is at etheric.com, where I show that from measurements they've taken, there's energy coming out of the core of our galaxy, and it's outside what they call the event horizon, and there's no way that could be because with a black hole you're not supposed to see any energy, you see.
Right.
And it's supposed to be black, but they're not seeing black, they're seeing this huge amount of energy there, and they try to sort of explain it away, saying, "Oh, well, this energy is stuff that's just outside the core, on the horizon, outside the horizon. Well, if that's the case, and this is the thing that kills it, how come it's not moving? Because the core, they've seen everything's whipping around there really fast around that core, and this isn't moving. So that means this is not outside the core; it's from inside the core. And for a simple putting two and two together, and I've done this on this posting, you see that this is not a black hole, but a mother star. I estimate the diameter even. The diameter, I estimate, plus or minus, is around half of the diameter of Mercury's orbit. So I don't know, what is that?
Big.
40 times the diameter of the sun or something, I forget. But, and it's not, its density, it's much more dense than our sun. It's about 400 times the density of the sun, but not nearly as dense as a white dwarf. Some white dwarfs are even more dense, and certainly not as dense as a neutron star. In fact, there's some astronomers that question whether neutron stars even exist. But here you have and the reason why a black hole doesn't form is because it's producing so much darn energy inside it, it's not able to collapse. You see, standard theory assumes that we live in a zero-sum game, that the universe is whatever, the law of energy conservation. To get energy out, you have to burn something over here, Whereas this new physics I was developing, it confirms the whole idea of free energy. In fact, it states that our whole galaxy is in an energy-creating environment. In other words, if you take a photon and you hang around with it long enough, follow it wherever it's going long enough, its energy is slowly increasing. And if you sum up all the photons in the sun, for example, you'll find that 13% of the sun's energy is produced by this blue shifting of photons. It's like putting money in the bank and you get interest out. So it's not a zero-sum game. It's an energy-generating environment.
So this created the superwave. And what happens when the superwave hits?
Well, how did I get from? Because originally I was saying, okay, I discovered a core explosion or something, and I was still thinking, okay, well, this is out there, 23,000 light years from us.
Right.
I didn't have any idea this would reach us, and then I was getting into the pulsars and everything. And I realized that some of the most amazingly intense pulsars and the most unusual in the sky, in other words, they're like the mother and father of pulsars, you might call them, mark the two closest supernova remnants to Earth. Why would they be marking here? Why not anywhere else? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I started studying this. One is the Vela remnant, which is about, 700 light years from us, very close. And the other is the Crab Nebula, which is about 6,000 light years, but towards the galactic center, anti-center, in the direction away from the galactic center. And I realized that the dates of these supernovae exploded coincided with a wave coming from the center of the galaxy, as if that wave triggered first the Vela star to explode, and then continued on for another 6,000 years at the speed of light and triggered the Crab Nebula explosion. And this is what opened my eyes to this whole thing, that we're dealing with a wave of energy coming from the center of the galaxy. Plus, it's encoded in mythology. This arrow, there's two arrows in the zodiac constellations. One is the Sagittarius arrow we talked about, shooting at the heart of the
Mm-hmm.
scorpion. The other is Sagitta. It's the arrow. It's called the arrow. And it's along the galactic plane, but at a distance of around, or an angular displacement from the center, from our perspective. If we're looking at the center of the galaxy and we put our compass there at 0 degrees and we measure angle along the galactic equator, okay, that's the Milky Way's equator, which we see in the sky, we find here at around 57.3 degrees this this arrow constellation, where the tip is the closest constellation star to that key angle. And why is that angle so key? Because it's the 1 radian point of the galaxy. So they're showing us the ancient star constellation cartographers, or whatever you want to call them. I mean, they were using the heavens like artists. They were putting science out in the heavens, basically, for posterity. And they were using the geometrical concept of the radian, where if you take a circle and you take the radius of the circle and you measure it out along the circumference, you probably have heard this in your geometry class in high school. If you measure out along the circumference, that radius, and you'll get an angle of 57.295 degrees. And it's called 1 radian. So here they were marking with another arrow, which seemed to be flying away from the galactic center at that point. And what that meant was, symbolically, is now you take that radian and you find, instead of stretching it out horizontally along the circumference of your circle, you bring it as a radius from the center of the galaxy to you, and you find that's marking the distance that arrow travels to Earth. So that arrow is really being shot at us. So that's a real wake-up call. And that's what led me to form the superwave theory. And at that point, I said, I've stumbled on the biggest discovery of the 20th century. Back then it was 20th century.
Yes.
And I had to communicate this. This is incredibly important. And so I changed my dissertation topic. From my physics theory, I changed it to that. I continued work on the physics theory, but for the dissertation, it ended up being on that topic.
Okay, the question hanging in everybody's mind right now is, so when the superwave hits us, what happens?
It do? Yeah. All hell breaks loose. It depends on the intensity.
Okay.
Now we've had to calm people. We've had 14 small events in the last 6,000 years, which you can see them by these little puff outbursts from the core. These are astronomical observations. And you find them in the geologic record. And my predictions of this were in my thesis, and later they discovered in ice core record, for example, these cosmic ray bursts, which lasted for a year or two, and they couldn't explain what would cause them. Well, they're small superwave volleys. But the real heavy stuff occurred during the Ice Age, and these events are what trigger creation of ice ages and termination of ice ages. And they don't do it alone. They work. It's a complicated series of events. It's not as simple as asteroid theory. Asteroid are very simple-minded theories that they propose, where the Earth gets hit by a comet and you have big explosion and it creates thermal wave. That's very simple to understand, and it doesn't take much to put it together. This requires is a whole chain of events that occur. When a superwave arrives, what is it? It's a blast of cosmic ray electrons and protons initially. along with electromagnetic radiation that suddenly arrive without warning, because remember, this is traveling the speed of light, so you don't see it coming until it's arrived. And when it arrives, it starts pushing cosmic dust into the solar system from its pressure. More severe things can happen, like, for example, the high energy. I guess somebody's calling me. I hear a beep, but I'll just ignore it. The more high energy cosmic rays, electrons and protons, will break through the heliopause sheath, which is our protective magnetic field, and start striking the sun, and will start acting as like a wind on the sun, and they're bringing with them a hydrogen wind. So it's cosmic rays with a hydrogen wind are hitting the sun and creating what I call the dragon mode effect. And that's where the solar plasma, the outer corona of the sun, gets blown away from the sun. And the sun becomes almost comet-like. In other words, it has a tail, which is due to the downwind part of this plasma that's being blown. And if the Earth happens to be in that tail, God help us, because we'll be fried. And it all depends where we are in our orbit when that hits. And this concept was told to me by Padre Avondios at the Russian Orthodox Church in Milan, who's a sensitive. He sees things. And he gave me an example about the catastrophe that could come. He took a candle flame, lit candle flame, and a gas benzene canister, and he started spraying the butane, and this stream of butane comes out, hits the candle flame, and creates this fiery torch from the flame. It's going out like a flamethrower, and it was a real impressive demonstration right there in his office. And I thought about it, and then I realized why this would happen. I've done a posting on this on etheric.com if you search dragon mode effect. And this may be where the concept of dragons comes from, where they say that they come from the air and they incinerate the surface of the Earth. So these things could have actually happened in the past.
Could this have been the cause of one of our mass destructions?
Now, I don't know that, but I know that more likely the solar flares that occurred, and if you look at the sequence of events, this stuff brings cosmic dust into the solar system. The cosmic dust surrounds the sun, blankets the sun, makes a cocoon. The sun's energy can't get out as easily as it could. It starts heating up. You get a lot of infrared radiation from the sun, which alters the spectrum on the Earth. The sun spectrum becomes changed. But it also heats up the sun and makes it more active. And it starts flaring incredibly going, I don't want to use a bad expression here, but it's going to through the roof, okay, on its flaring.
Okay.
And we see this going on in other stars. We call them T-Tauri stars. They're stars similar to the sun, mass similar to the sun, that are surrounded by dust. And the dust so aggravates them that they're continually putting out solar flares. So whereas we get flares maybe at sunspot cycle, certain time of the sunspot cycle when we're at high sunspot cycle period every 11 years, we would be getting it all continuously. And not only that, but you could have so many flares that one could piggyback on the other, and you could get these mega flares coming towards us. And I believe that one of these events, what killed the megafauna at the end of the Ice Age, around 13,000 years ago. Not only believe, I wrote a paper on this. I studied the ice core record, and I found the exact date. I can tell you the exact date here. I have it right here. 12,837 years BP, before present, before 1950. So before now, it would be, you add another 70 years. So about 12,900 years ago, around. And you see in the record, in the in the ice core record, you see this huge ionization spike. In other words, the atmosphere became so ionized it produced the biggest ionization spike that we'd had for tens of thousands of years. And at this time, you see that there were some previous events. Oh, also the carbon-14 in the atmosphere was going up gangbusters. It started going up about 100 years earlier, 120 years earlier, when the Earth was hit with this dust invasion, which presumably was pushed in by the cosmic rays. I know all this is a lot of facts, but things are not simple in nature. This is something that we have no idea. We don't see these happening today. We are living in a summer, so to speak, the Garden of Eden days. If it wasn't for the COVID virus, you know. Don't let me get started on that. That scam.
No.
You know, I don't know if you. I hope people aren't believing that that happened by chance, and the whole thing with the elite and their interest to bring the population down by a factor of 10 and make a one-world government and all that. These are not. Oh,
I've already speculated on that all over the place.
Yeah, you probably have had shows on that. So they're really
Absolutely.
messing things up for us. And it could be, because we can get to the prophecies, there's a mystic called Peter Denov, Bulgarian mystic, who I found out from my wife. She's Bulgarian. That's how I found out about him. And he died in 1944, and right before his death, just a day before, while he was in his bed, he made this prediction about this cosmic catastrophe that would happen to Earth, and it was as if he'd read my thesis. You know, it was incredible. Everything was there about the cosmic rays and what they were going to do to the Earth, and the date that he told some of his followers, and it's difficult to find on the internet, but my wife tells me it's 2029.
23 something?
2029. In 9 years is the date he gave. And there's other dates like you find from people who have been in the classified world and are spilling some of the beans. They say we're going to start the stuff hits the fan or starts to hit the fan around 2025. So we're going to start seeing the signs of some strange thing. Maybe we'll start seeing the galactic center becoming more active, let's say. Now, it's very interesting that COVID was engineered right at this point, and they're trying to bring us in lockdown so they can control us, put chips in us or whatever some people are saying. It's almost like they want us to be turned into robots so they can manage us before this catastrophe. So it makes me wonder, do they know this is going to be happening? Maybe they read my book and they realized it's correct, and there's some stories that circulate that we have a space program. We have interstellar ships.
Yes.
We've discussed all this. And
they
say that they went and checked out the concept. They took a ship in the direction of the galactic center, and they found the horizon was coming towards us. They came back and told everyone we got a superwave coming, and they didn't release the date. They keep that highly secret, apparently. There was one guy that released a date, but he apparently didn't know the right date. He was claiming 2017 it would hit, which nothing really happened. So, you know, we even have remote viewers working on this. I'm in touch with a group of remote viewers, and at least they cleared this year. This year is going to be okay. There's a lady in April, Elizabeth April. I don't know if you heard. She has a program. She is in contact with the Galactic Federation, and they are talking about a superwave coming. She didn't know what superwave. I heard her lecture at the UFO conference in Nevada in February, and apparently she didn't know about superwaves, so I had to get in contact with her and sort of inform her about the whole idea, and so she can ask certain questions of them, and I'm waiting to see what responses she gets back, because I and a lot of people would like to know when is this going to arrive so we can get prepared, and not have it.
I don't see. Yeah. I don't see it coming for quite a while, to tell you the truth.
Quite a while. In other words, decades. You're saying.
Yeah, more than decades.
I hope you're right. In my book,
it feels to me as though it's going. You know, we're going to get the forewarnings of it coming. We're going to have, you know, certainly seasonal upsets and things like that, and we're already having those. But the actual impact, I guess, is what I would call it. I don't think it's going to be for quite a while.
I hope you're right, and Denov is wrong. They also have the Fatima prophecy. She was told that it's going to occur within her lifetime, and she's now in her 70s or early 80s, I forget. Not the Fatima prophecy. Fatima prophecy was talking about this. I discussed that in the last chapter of my book.
Yeah.
But there was also the other one, the Garabandal prophecy, and the apparition of Garabandal of the young girls, and they've now grown up. Some of them have passed away, but there's one who's still alive, and as she was told, she would live to see it. So it's very possible in her lifetime. 2029 is a possibility. In my book, I say, to give a ballpark figure, I say we're overdue for one, that we expect one in the next 400 years, so that people don't completely panic. And that's the way I arrive at that, is because you look at the past events. The way you find those is you go in the ice core record. That's how I tested my hypothesis, one of the main tests. Of course, I gathered my dissertation is 763 pages. It had the honor of being the longest dissertation in the history of the program.
Oh, jeez.
In fact, they haul it out when somebody is planning their dissertation to scare these people, thinking that they're going to expect them to put out something like this. And I'm still working on it. I mean, there's stuff I've discovered after I did the dissertation, after I wrote Earth Under Fire, and it's like an ongoing process.
But it seems that it's fascinating that with every burst that hits us, there is a leap in consciousness of some sort.
Well, yeah, in fact, not only that, but it creates genetic mutation, and that's talked about in Ray Stanford's version of the Fatima prophecy, and he's probably getting his stuff through ET contact. You know Ray Stanford? He has UFO
heard of him.
Experience. And he wrote a book, amazing book, The Fatima Prophecy. And everything he writes there that's from his, quote, source, which could be ET, it's like he's talking about exactly the superwave in great detail. And my dissertation committee chairman, who's opened this kind of stuff, he was away for a while down San Francisco, and he comes back with his book. He says, "You should read this." Exactly what you're saying.
Wait. You've tied all of this also to the progression of the equinoxes as well, which I found fascinating.
Yes. for example, they use the equinox. There's myths in the equinox connected, like the one with Virgo, for example. There's an example. Virgo is lying along the equinox, and there's a myth connected with her that Virgo connected, the Isis myth, that a flood was brought on the earth. And if you look at when this might happen, you see that the vernal equinox, when it goes from Virgo into Leo, Leo is the sun symbolized astrologically, and a great heat on the earth. And that's when you had the great flood, one of the great floods, because we've had many. And it's not due to the shaking of the earth so much, or you've heard this in 2012, and the movie. It's not that way. The way it happened was the Earth's poles were covered with ice, of course, more so than they are today. The ice sheets, they came down as far as Ohio, for example, in North America. They covered all of Alaska, half of Alaska was covered. So when the sun put out its solar flare blasts, you see myths about how the earth was scorched and it burned trees and everything, dried up the rivers. The myth of Phaethon, in the ancient Greek story of Phaethon, which the priests told Solon, the mayor of Athens, had gone to Egypt, and he was told this at Sais, and they told him that this myth is metaphorical. It's not just about a story for kids. Here we're talking about cosmic events that happen to the earth. So he was informed of this, but they didn't go further, because they had a secrecy code, and just to let him know that there's. So in other words, the people are supposed to figure this out for themselves, so they don't distort it. Distort it's sacred knowledge. This whole thing, the myths are sacred. It's a way of conveying important events into the future. And it's not just in ancient Greece, but you find the flood myth all over the world. I was going from library to library collecting Indian myths. The Indians did a credible job of handing down their tales about the flood. And so what happens is that when the solar flare, mega flare, hits the earth and is burning, is roasting the earth, the ice sheets start to melt, the upper surface of the ice sheets, and they form lakes. Now I was saying this way back in 1983, I published my dissertation, and only recently with satellite imagery have we seen lakes on the surface of the Greenland ice sheet. And it's exactly saying what I was saying, but you would have lakes, incredible, huge lakes, and many, many, many lakes, like we see them here and there now, but during an event like this, it would be covered with these. And in my dissertation, I was saying, what happens when one lake, the dam breaks, the ice dam that's retaining the lake, let's say, because these ice sheets, they're 2.5 kilometers in height, maybe 3 kilometers at the center. What happens when a dam breaks and this water sort of surges down the ice sheet, triggering other lakes to discharge and so on? And it's a domino effect. And by the time it gets to the edge of the ice sheet, you've got this wave of water about 1,000 kilometers wide and maybe half a mile high, or at least half a kilometer high, traveling at hundreds of miles per hour, surging across the continent. And anything in its wake is going to get drowned. It's going to surmount mountains. I was in Bosnia looking at the pyramid in 2014, and that pyramid is built in
40,000
years ago. Huh?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I've interviewed Dr. Sam, so yeah.
I was there, and I he had a date, carbon-14 date, 30,000. I told him it's actually older because you got to convert that to calendar years, and I gave him the conversion scale. So he's got all that, so he's converting now. So 34,000 years old, and that's covered with flood sediment that due to one of these previous events. Yeah, and that's why it's buried, and that's why people say, "Oh, that's just a mountain." Well, it's a pyramid. It was a pyramid, but it got flooded over and dumped all this sand on it. And that explains why they had the tunnels. The tunnels were a place to take refuge from the flood and the cosmic rays. And if you study the ice record, you see that right about the time that was built, before that date, there was some pretty heavy solar flare activity, high cosmic ray levels based on carbon-14. And right after that, so they built it in time, and they had a refuge because it's wonderful. And not only is it healing, it heals you in the tunnels, but it produces, I guess, fresh air. It's got ions. It's got high ion content. It's actually healing.
Yeah, it's high negative ions. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it's not like any of the baloney shelters that our military would build. Which, this is natural. These people had a high science back then, which is amazing.
Well, they had the ceramic boulders that they had over the water to keep it from flooding the tunnels too, which was fascinating.
Right. You've been there, huh?
No, I've done a lot of research on Dr. Sam because I've had him on the show.
Yeah, it's a very interesting place to visit. Anyway, the Grand Canyon that everyone's familiar with was not produced by the Colorado River. That is a ridiculous theory. I mean, how could the little Colorado River carve that, and flow uphill? They're saying if you go to the plaque there, here's the Grand Canyon, you're looking out, and they're giving their theory, saying the problem is we don't understand how the Colorado River flowed uphill to carve it.
Oh, God.
Because the grade of the land is uphill there. And the truth is these glacier waves came down from all that distance from from Canada, from the edge of the ice sheet. They traveled all that way, flooding over mountains, and ended up flooding that whole area there. The whole area where the Grand Canyon was submerged in water. It was like a mega lake covering several states at large. And the water, there was apparently some canyon, some small canyon where it could escape down, which is what the Colorado River is today. And it just carved it every time. It was like water going down a bathtub. And if you look at the canyon, Grand Canyon, it's carved, the canyon walls show flooding from all directions. It's dendritic, if you know what I mean. It's not like a single canyon. Dendritic, it's like water's coming from everywhere, going wherever it can find a place, and it's carving this canyon. So I did this in my last lecture in February. I was showing slides. We flew over the Grand Canyon in the airplane, and we were taking pictures, and we went there and took a lot of pictures. So it's really amazing for everyone to see, just so you understand the magnitude of this, and that the Indian myths are true.
It happened with the Antarctic too, because the Reese map that they show that at one point that all of that ice had been melted, and the map shows the outline of the continent of Antarctica, and that it definitely, there was dry land there, and people often wonder, well, how could this have happened? Well, if the ice melted, it would be real easy.
Exactly.
There are.
I discussed it in my book, right?
I read
or
your
you didn't
book.
Get that far. I caught you. You didn't catch that. And the question is how, why was Antarctica ice-free? And you get these baloney theories like Velikovsky, Hapgood, Flemath, who say, Antarctica was up where South America is, and then the poles shifted by 30 degrees and came to where its present place. Well, if they just look at the ice core evidence, see, if it was that way, it would mean at the end of the ice age, Antarctica should have cooled off, right? In other words, it would have been warmer during the ice age in Antarctica, and then it cooled off. And if you do look at the ice records, and we put about 10 different ice cores into Antarctica, in every case you see that during the ice age, Antarctica was like 9 degrees centigrade cooler, not warmer. So it had to be something else. So what was it? Well, you go back in time, and 120,000 years ago, we had an interglacial where the climate was actually warmer than our current climate. It was a few degrees warmer, and in that case, Antarctica's shorelines would have been ice-free. And this implies, quite astoundingly, that the Parry-Rees map dates from a map that had been handed down over 120,000 years from an advanced civilization that was able to navigate the oceans at that time. I mean, these are mind-blowing things that are swept, that are covered over because people don't stretch their imagination a little.
Well, isn't there today a river in Antarctic that I know that the military is told not to fly over, but there is a lake there in the middle of the ice?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, it's also a volcanic area, so it could, due to its own heating from the volcanoes, it could create ice. Mm-hmm. But you're saying that there's a surface lake, huh?
Yes, there's a surface lake.
And they say that the Nazis had their own secret base there after World War II.
Under the caverns,
They went in with submarines they found under the water passages. I don't know why Hollywood hasn't made a movie about this. Make a Jules Verne movie look like something real passé.
That's true. I just noticed. We've been talking here for an hour. Did you want to take a break, or you want to just keep going?
Yeah, I could like 4 minutes or something, 3-4 minutes.
Okay, I'll babble on here, and you get your water.
Yeah. Okay, so you keep going, and I'll take off.
I'll just keep talking. A lot of the material that he's been talking about certainly is material that we've covered in one way or another over time, and I think what I find the most interesting about this amazing book that he's written is that he validates all of these quote unquote theories with scientific fact, which blows me away and makes me want to buy tons of the books and give them to people that say I'm crazy or I'm out of my mind and stuff like that, because so much of what he goes into is so clearly related to these mega waves, these super waves that come from the center of the universe, and it makes more sense to me that science, it doesn't take away any of the spirituality, it doesn't take away any of the mysticism, but it validates the fact that a lot of the things that we have looked upon as myths and fable and all sorts of stuff like that, it gives it greater validity. They've found, and this is from his book, and I can't quote you exactly, but that humanity, Homo sapiens, they found evidence of Homo sapiens here for 145,000 years, so that we've been on this planet for a very long time, and there have been many mass extinctions. And what I love about this material is that the explanation as to what happens that causes mass extinctions has been in front of us all along, and the generation after generation of humanity has gone through these experiences, and today we can explain it. I don't think we know how to avoid it, but it's explainable so that it gives you a greater sense of, okay, this is why things happen. I've been talking for a couple of years about how farmers are having trouble with knowing when to plant and when to harvest because the seasons are changing, and they are. And there is also a sense of, and I think it has to be, there's almost an element of paranoia in the air these days, and I want to blame it on cosmic dust, though I'll never be able to prove that. But that there is a sense here of humanity is feeling something coming and they don't know what it is, and they try to pin it on, either politics or pandemics or things like that. But the reality is there is something hurtling towards us, and we don't know when it's going to hit or where or if we're going to survive it or not. And it seems to me that if we know what's coming, we should be able to in some way help to prevent it. And Paul talked about the fact that there is a space program now, but there's been a secret space program out there since the 80s or the 70s. I can't remember which. If you go online and look at Above Majestic on YouTube, it does go into a lot of that stuff. A lot of things that we call conspiracy are actually factual, and it's up to us to kind of take a look at all of this stuff and then try to push our politicians into talking to one another so that these issues can be addressed. So that I don't know if there's any kind of shield we could put up, but certainly science fiction has talked about a shield that the Earth had around it, and if science fiction has talked about it, I would imagine scientists are working on it now, because our science fiction has always been a precursor to opening humanity up to what is in reality going to come. I mean, you look at Star Trek with the doors opening and shutting, and wasn't that really cool when it was on TV decades ago? And now we go in and out of malls and the doors open and close behind us and we think nothing of it. So that science fiction has always been opening our consciousness up to things that were going to come and we would become used to in the future. So why not a shield around the Earth? Why not? I don't see us all migrating to another planet, but it does seem to me that in the past generations, the fables all tell about how that parts of humanity did survive these super waves. So why can't more of humanity survive them if we know what's coming and provide? I mean, there are shelters and things like that, but sometimes these super waves go on for years and years and years. So, or 1,000 years. 1,000 years sometimes.
The one that killed the Neanderthals went for 3,000 or 4,000 years. And
that's a long time to be underground.
Now, that's not in my book because all the data that came out to conclude about Neanderthals was around 2014. My book initially was published in 1997. I self-published, and then it was published by Inner Traditions, Bear & Company, in 2005. And so there's a lot of new things that I have published in Nexus magazine briefly about it. The article
Can you get a little closer to the microphone so you're a little louder?
Okay, let me see. Okay, is that better?
Oh, much better, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I published in Nexus magazine about that. You see, they discovered that they thought Neanderthals died out over 10,000 years during the Ice Age. And they were suggesting, well, maybe humans displaced them or something. At that time, the guy did a key study, some guy from Harvard or somewhere, that showed that he redated all the remains and found, that the Neanderthals all died out at the same time. And they didn't talk about catastrophe, but it just happens that date that they concluded coincides with the biggest cosmic ray peak in the Earth's record for the last 60,000 years. And it was also the biggest rise of radiocarbon. Radiocarbon in the Earth's atmosphere rises because of cosmic rays, whether it's galactic or solar. And you see this 2,000-year rise of carbon-14, and at the peak, you have this reversal of the Earth's magnetic field. Incredible. What causes the reversal? The cosmic rays. Reversals don't happen on their own, and I'm the first to talk about this in my dissertation, how this happens. They find with the sun, with the Earth's magnetic field, that when the Earth gets hit by a solar flare, the magnetic field momentarily decreases in intensity, and they call that main phase decrease. And they've seen up to a 1.5% decrease. So all I did, I said, what if you scale that up 100 times? A mega flare hitting the Earth, it's going to decrease so much that the Earth's field is nulled out. See what happens? The cosmic rays from the sun get trapped in the Earth's magnetic field, and they create a current, a belt current around the Earth that creates a magnetic field exactly opposed to the Earth's field. And so it can, if that's large enough, it will actually cancel it out. And they've done experiments that show that if you put an external magnetic field on a magnet, you can actually flip it. So it could actually flip the core field, which is a matter of reversing the current in the core of the Earth. And that's apparently what happened 41,000 years ago, 42,000. You see a period of 400 years where the Earth's magnetic field went to 5% of its current intensity, and it had a reversal at the beginning of that. It was like a reversal of 50 years or so, and then another reversal at the end of that period, another 50 years.
What would that do to the surface of the Earth?
Well, you're completely unprotected. The Earth's magnetic field is no longer protecting you. You're getting hit by these mega flares that cause the field to reverse. And so anything outdoors would have gotten lethal dose. And this explains why the Neanderthal passed away. So the question that we should be asking, what sociologists or anthropologists should ask now, is why mankind made it through that event, because humans were living at that time. Why mankind made it through and Neanderthals didn't. And you say, well, maybe Neanderthals were hunting when the sun was out, whereas humans hunted in the dark or something, and was safer. Or maybe humans stayed in their caves and Neanderthals didn't. So, this is an interesting question that we need to find, but you find it recorded in the myths about the Mayan myth about the men of straw and then the men of wood, and each one was terminated by catastrophe. So these were maybe the men of wood or whatever, quote, men of wood.
Would one of these births be like an EMP burst?
From the sun,
I'm wondering.
Or from the
superwave?
I'm
wondering if one of these super waves or bursts or whatever hit the planet now, would all of our electronics go out?
Exactly. It would have an EMP at its forefront, which would knock out all communications. All cell phones would go dead, telecommunications, TV signals, we would be, that's a danger. All our communications would be knocked out, like happened in Hawaii with the starfish explosion, where they exploded a nuclear weapon in the atmosphere, and they blacked out all of Hawaii. So not only that, but it blacks out. It fries your transformers, sort of like what a solar flare would do. So they say it could take decades to get the grid back up, because you have to figure you have to manufacture these transformers and replace the burned out ones.
Well, that's assuming you survive the burst.
Right. Of course, this is, it's not going to be as bad as a solar flare, mega flare. It's not going to be as bad as what killed the mammoths and mastodons, but it would definitely create genetic change and could create some radiation sickness.
Could it be the radiation sickness that killed off the Neanderthals?
That's very possible. It may have, if it wasn't at lethal dose where you die in a few days, it could have been enough that it wiped out their immune system and they started catching colds and stuff and died of that. We don't know that it can't. From 42,000 years later, it's difficult to say how quickly they died out, because there's plus and minus with all this. But we know that they all coincide at that same date, let's say within 100 years or so, a few hundred years. So it could have, a few generations could have died out because of that.
Well,
maybe it sterilized them. They could have been sterilized too. That's another thing to think about.
That's a good point. In your book, you talked about how humanity has been around, and I don't remember something like 145,000 years.
Okay. Well, that's I'm quoting the standard view based on genetic. What do they call it? They look at the genes, the mitochondrial DNA. They've come up with an age for the human race. Yeah.
But the Neanderthals were part of that, and they didn't last long at all. So
we have Neanderthal blood in us. If you're Northern European, they say a lot of the genes are Neanderthal there. And look at all the races we have. The story of Babel, that before all languages were one, but afterwards everyone was speaking different languages. Well, it's the same with the human race. We may have been more homogeneous before, but when you have a catastrophe like this, it's a radiation event. It not only kills off a lot of people, but it creates a lot of genetic mutation. And so people end up not mixing as much. They're in these pockets. The survivors are sort of in pockets, and each having their own genetic mutations, they end up evolving differently. So you have Asian Americans, Afro Americans, Eskimo, each with a slightly different genetic background coming.
And Eskimos have a gene that allows them to survive in the cold that we don't have, in the warmer regions. And there is all of that going on now. But what fascinates me is there have been, depending on what culture you're looking at, how many worlds there have been, or how many mass extinctions there have been, or whatever. I mean, everybody has their own number and explanation to them, but the answer or the explanation to what has happened here on planet Earth, according to your book, and it makes great sense to me, comes from the center of the galaxy, these superwaves that come at us all the time. And obviously, the knowledge of what causes it and what's coming at us have been out there for thousands of years. The explanation as to what's happening and in the different mythologies and the stories and so.
But we didn't believe
answer,
it. You know, we wouldn't believe that those. We thought those were just bedtime stories. But of course, you did have to believe in the biblical flood. You know.
Well, sure.
Although the scientists wouldn't. The scientists didn't. They consider that poppycock. In fact, you know that geology was a reaction against the flood theorists of the 1800s. They got fed up with people theorizing that the drift, the deposits around the Earth were due to a flood, and said, no, these were due to glaciers moving very slowly. There was no catastrophism at all. So then
the erratica,
got formed into this non-catastrophe paradigm, which they actually oppose any theories that are going to talk about catastrophes. But you see it on Mars, too. You look on Mars and you see these canyons, the canyons of Mars. And one geologist noted the similarity of the canyons on Mars to those on Earth. So what happened on Earth happened on Mars, too. Mars had ice. There's actually ice, they've proven this, under its surface, just a few millimeters under the surface. You have ice because water on Mars, ice will sublime, means it goes directly from ice state to gas, and it leaves the dust. But the ice is still there, and in the case of a solar flare event that hit Mars, that ice would suddenly liquefy, and you get thunderous, I call them glacier waves, pouring down through these canyons, carving these canyons, just like on Earth. On the moon, they found evidence of moon rocks that had been glazed. By such an intense heat, it turned the rock to glass. And Herbert Zook, a NASA scientist, wrote a paper where he analyzed the solar flare tracks on these glazed surfaces and was able to get a timetable of solar flare intensity on the moon, and he found it went exponentially up and reached a peak around 16,000 years ago. If you considered that there was also a change of the amount of cratering, the cratering was at a faster rate, that would somewhat compress that peak and bring it a little forward in time. So you'll find evidence. The Earth is like a recording, just like you do a magnetic recording of your voice. The Earth records what's happened to it. It's all recorded in the ice record, in the geologic record. And the problem is, geologists, they haven't got their mind around it. All of these concepts I'm talking about would be, they don't teach them in universities, and a lot of scientists would be difficult to accept them because they're so different from the way they believe. I did finally get my glacier wave paper published a few years ago because it was taking me so long to get everything else published because of all the resistance I was getting. One paper took me 30 years to publish on my ice core findings, the cosmic dust findings. We found a lot of tin and lead in one of the samples, along with precious metals like gold. I was the first to discover gold in ice. Iridium.
Yeah, but how far down? How far down did you have to go to get that?
Well, that core was from about 1,400 meters down, so almost a mile below the surface in Greenland.
And how many years does that?
Well,
how far back does
that
take
core
it?
was not accurate initially, and when I published my paper, I had different dates. But now, as we've gotten more core, that was there were in the days I was working, there were only 2 ice cores, one in Greenland, one in Antarctica. And then they started drilling others, and we got better chronologies of the ice records. And I was able to redate that Greenland core. And it turns out that event occurs around 49,000 years ago, where you get the tin, something like 90% of the dust in that core was tin and lead, can you believe? And now you can understand why it was so hard to get my data published, because nobody finds that in accumulation of tin and lead. They thought my samples were contaminated, and it was a journey. I had gotten inspiration, almost like a voice told me, check the isotopes. Tin has 10 isotopes. It has the most isotopes of any element on Earth. And one way to tell if something is cosmic or not is the isotopic ratios. If they're different from what we find on Earth, we assume it's cosmic, because that means it's been bombarded out in space by cosmic rays. And so I was presenting my results. This was after my dissertation had been published. I was presenting in Mainz, Germany, and they happened to put me up for a place to stay at one of the faculty houses, guest houses, with a geophysicist from Australia who did mass spectrometry work, geochemist. And he was the first to make a breakthrough on doing mass spectrometry of tin, because they couldn't measure accurately before, and he developed a new technique. And it was like, how do these things happen? It's like coincidence. You're put in the same room, and I mentioned to him, well, I made the discovery of a lot of tin. I have ice core samples with this tin. Would you be interested to check it out for isotopic anomaly? So he says, sure, and I mailed him the sample to Australia, and he found anomalies in 3 of the isotopes, and one of them was a huge anomaly. So there was no question that this was extraterrestrial. It was the first time they found an isotopic anomaly in tin that could be extraterrestrial. And so this was one thing. The other was the fact it contained nickel and iridium, which you find in great abundance in extraterrestrial material. It's thousands of times more abundant in cosmic material. But I didn't have a good theory, because they kept saying, but how would you explain all this happening to have so much tin and lead? And so finally it dawned on me, what is it about tin and lead that makes them different from any of the other elements? And that is they're superconductors. When they're in space, they're in a metallic state, at 3 degrees Kelvin, 3 degrees above absolute zero, they're going to be superconducting, these particles. And any magnetic field that sweeps through the galaxy is going to sweep these up by what's called the Meissner effect, if you want to look it up. And so it's like a rake sweeping up these particles and sweeping them and concentrating them. And so you could get whole comets formed just out of lead and tin and lead. And it turned out, if you assume that this was what you were seeing in Greenland happened all over the world, it would have been one of the biggest cosmic dust incursions since the last 300,000 years.
Wow.
And it would have polluted the water, because lead, it was above the EPA limit for lead contamination of water. It was about 10 times or whatever. So it wouldn't have been healthy for sure. But it would have affected the sun, and it's one example of many that I found, and I've written papers about this, of coming into the solar system and causing climatic change of the Earth.
Isn't it quite amazing that humanity has survived as long as it has, considering what keeps befalling the planet?
Yeah, it's a real struggle. If you go to Turkey, they have dug tunnels underground. There's certain cities that go down like 11 stories underground. They got rooms and everything.
Yeah,
they like
they
had
are
a whole city. Huh?
Well, they did, and that's not very far from Göbekli Tepe either. So.
Yeah. But not just there. I mean, all over. In fact, these tunnels are often sealed up so people don't get lost in them. I know there's some in Athens, Greece, where I spent time, and there's rumors that it could be accessed from underneath a certain building, or a certain monastery has an entrance, and they keep those quiet for I don't know what reason. It's sort of like a part of the mystique or something. But there also in Germany or Austria, I think there was a guy. He was doing some repairs in his basement, and the wall broke through into a tunnel, and he found he could go quite a distance underneath. And I think he was, for some reason, killed off or something. They didn't want that known. It's like they're trying to keep these tunnels secret.
Well, there are tremendous tunnels under the Giza Plateau.
Yes, of course, Herodotus wrote about that, but they don't show the tourists those.
Oh gosh, no.
Yeah, and they say there's some tunnels, like from Tibet, that lead to underground cities like Shangri-La. This may not be just a myth. There's people that claim, no, that's real. People go down, they never come back, but it's because they're not allowed to come back. They don't want people to know on the surface that they're...
Well, and then you've got all the hollow earth stuff too. So, Admiral Byrd theoretically went there.
Well, you don't have to say the whole center of the earth is hollow, but you could say that going down 10 miles underneath the surface of the earth, maybe you have huge caverns and hollowed out regions. Some of these caverns can be immense. If you ever go to, what's it called, Carlsbad Cavern in New Mexico, it's incredible. Like you're inside cathedrals. Cathedrals would fit inside those. And from what you hear on the internet, people are leaking stuff about military has tunnels going into huge caverns, and some of these caverns would make Carlsbad Cavern look like small potatoes. And then they talk about ETs living underground. So apparently, in fact, in the myths, they talk about the ant people that would protect them. And so you could say some of these grays look like ants, big ants, if you want to call it.
Wasn't that the Hopis? Didn't they say the ant people protected them?
Right. They came out of the ground and they had them hide in kivas.
No, so with all this information, knowing that there is at some time a super wave aimed in our direction, or it may be on the way already, who knows? This information is put out there in the stars. The direction it's come from is, we're told where the source is. How does the Earth as a whole protect itself from a superwave? How would you protect?
You were talking about that when I came in. You were talking about a shield, and I talk about that in my book. Also, at the end of the video, there's a video produced based on the book. It's called Earth Under Fire, and if people are interested, they can view it on Gaia TV. So many of your listeners perhaps have subscriptions to Gaia TV. And if you don't, I think they give you, was it a month free or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
And you just put in Earth Under Fire, and you'll see it's excellent video. These people did a professional job. Jay Widener, who's made a lot of videos, he was writing the script and was main help in that. and towards the end of the video, I talk about what could we do to protect the planet, and I'm talking about the possibility of creating an electromagnetic shield. And it's not science fiction. I mean, we have the technology to do this. You know, it uses microwave beams, where it's called phase conjugate microwave technology. Tesla was working with this kind of stuff.
Yes.
You can, and I don't know if you've heard of Thomas Bearden. He's talked about it, about experimentation done in the Soviet Union at that time and the U.S. The U.S. has experimented with this, and in my book on pulsars, I have a book called Decoding the Message of the Pulsars, which is where I got the inspiration for the superwave, and that's a fascinating book. It shows that there is a galactic federation. They use these pulsars apparently as a GPS system for interstellar travel, and they're also beaming a warning message to us about the superwave that happened in the past to attract our attention, so we get sort of, clued in. They have the prime directive. They're not supposed to come and change our diapers. It's up to us to do this. And I've done the best I can. This is all falling on my shoulders because I'm the one that made the initial discovery. I found the pulsars, and I got all sorts of poo-poo from SETI. The guy wouldn't even look at my book. I finally published it in a referee journal, a summary. But still, you don't hear about my stuff on the mainstream media. It's all suppressed. And if you want to know, Forrestal, he was, chief of Secretary of Defense in the 1940s, before he was thrown out the 14th floor window for talking too much about the Project Paperclip, or was it some project where they went to Antarctica and encountered Nazi UFOs in a battle, and they whipped our ass, and we went back to Washington, and they were afraid to tell anybody that the Nazis, after World War II was over, had beat the hell out of us.
No, that was Project High Jump.
High Jump, yeah, and he took a high jump, so to speak, after leaking. But he was saying, and it's in Tompkins' book, or Tompkins, who was working with some of the black projects that put us on the moon and so on. He wrote a book, and he's also been interviewed before he passed away. And he was saying that Forrestal had said that everything you read that's in the books is false. That everything that's taught in the universities, all what the PhDs learn in the field of medicine, science, sociology, it's all incorrect. And so we have to, and I agree. I mean, incredible amount of baloney taught in physics and astronomy. They still haven't, and they don't, they're not, it's sort of like linear thinking, and they keep going with their standard views, just like the Catholic Church in the days of Galileo. They're frozen into this religious view. It's really a religious view, similar to religion. They don't think. They don't use their minds to think and to expand their horizons. And that's what I deal with. And I thought by now I would have alerted. We sent out Starburst Foundation, the foundation I founded, and you can look it up. It's starburstfound.org. You didn't put that URL up there, but that's the Starburst Foundation. It has a lot of information on superwaves. It has also forums. You can go to, like one on superwaves. There's a forum with a lot of information. Also on etheric.com, I have a lot of information on postings there if you search for superwaves. But we formed in '84. This was right after I got my PhD dissertation in '83. I formed that, and we've had a 40-year struggle to get funds. People like to fund the arts and other things, not theories that are going against mainstream science. And one of our goals was to inform humanity about this. We did send out, we had a project sort of to inform all the main governments. We sent a brochure summarizing all about the superwave theory and the fact that we are overdue for one, and so that they will understand. And this was back in the 80s when we still had nuclear weapons, and we were warning them to not mistake the EMP for a nuclear blast. We don't want another world war with nuclear bombs. And Unfortunately, they got rid of their weapons to some extent. But we sent to all the UN ambassadors, to the White House, to some of the defense committees, Senate defense committees, nuclear defense agency, so on. And we did get back some responses. Senator Hatfield wrote me a nice letter back from Oregon, and some of the ambassadors, like the British ambassador, Tanzanian ambassador, a few others, who they weren't, they weren't criticizing the idea. They were saying thanks for letting us know, and they would take it seriously. But all that has probably been forgotten, here 30 years later. And I don't know, I did the best I could, and I don't know who else is going to be coming in my wake. I'm getting on in age. I'm hoping I will, if we do have a super wave in 2029, like Peter Deno says, I hope I'm alive to see it at least. Sort of like the guy on the volcano there in, what was it, in 2012? He's on the volcano and when it erupts.
I love that movie. Yeah.
But anything people can do to spread the word, read my book, see the video, and there's also my dissertation. If you're into reading technical stuff, I have
700 pages. Don't think so.
It's updated. I've updated it with a lot of nice pictures. You see a lot of nice Mars pictures of the canes of Mars in color, which can't really do that in Earth Under Fire. Earth Under Fire is black and white. I have a few pictures there, but some of these pictures are astounding. And, a lot of, I keep updating it with the latest information that's coming out. The superwave theory has made something like 13 or 14 predictions that have all become confirmed. So there's the track record. And if you're interested to see them, to read them, go on Starburst, go to starburstfound.org and select predictions, or etheric.com. I have it also there, superwave predictions. And it lists all the predictions and, things where they were thinking entirely different. Like, for example, they thought galactic core explosions happen every 10 to 100 million years. And I was saying, no, it could be every 10,000 years, fairly big ones. And later they found, as they were studying these, sure enough, now they're saying every 10,000 years. In fact, a fellow who was working for Starburst was one of our volunteers. We're a volunteer organization. We don't have money to pay anybody. If you want, please make a contribution. We're currently sustained by one donor only. Without this one guy, where would we be? So please make contribution to the foundation because we're supposed to be the ones to alert the world if we see the signs coming. Because they got it totally wrong. It's incredible so much baloney that's out there in the scientific world. So I have all this on my shoulders. I wish we could hire people to have a mass media campaign. I write my own press releases, and they're not published. We maybe need to pay people to get things in print. I don't know. But I'm doing the best I can, and of course I work in other fields too, so I'm not now doing this only. I also work on subquantum kinetics, and it would be nice to have people working just on this. One book has just come out called Day After Singularity. It really promotes my book on pulsars, decoding messages of pulsar, devotes a whole chapter to it because he considers it so mind-blowing. It's proof. It's actual proof of life outside of our planet. You know, and benevolent life, because they're trying to help us. You know, if we will help ourselves, if we will only help ourselves. So now we have the technology to create shields instead of using the technology to demolish the World Trade Center like it was used, because you can make directed energy weapons, and I talk about that in my book, Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion. This technology is described there. And in fact, I talk about one leak that came out at a conference where one French physicist was talking about the microwave Mylar platform in space that we have, and he was quickly, Jacques Vallée told him, taisez-vous, which means shut up. People aren't supposed to know about that. In other words, it's Mylar, so it's not detected by radar, and it's a microwave beam platform. And apparently some off-world civilization, it could have been spun off by the black projects, you know, like Eisenhower said, beware of the military-industrial complex. Well,
yes.
They apparently have these weapons, and they wanted to demonstrate to us their power, and they took out the World Trade Center. And you could say, well, maybe they were doing a benefit to us, so it wouldn't sort of lean over and hit all the other buildings in domino fashion. I don't think so. It would have stood, you know, after the plane crash. It was obviously going to stand. And
that was
Judy Wood
yeah.
says,
Those were controlled demolitions for sure.
Yeah, but you watch it, as Judy Wood said in her book, you see a dustification of the building. You see concrete falling, and it turns to dust in midair. And controlled demolition doesn't do that. They found their cars with burned roofs. The paint was burned right off the roof in a bullseye pattern. In other words, every so often you get it's like an interference pattern of energy burning the paint off the roofs of the cars. It looks like a cookie cutter, you know. And we have this capability. It's phase conjugation. You keep pumping energy into the beam. It keeps pumping up and up and up in energy because it's trapped in the beam. It's not like a regular radio broadcast. Energy stays in the beam. You know, give me a team of scientists, I'll build you one. You know, it's not that difficult. Give me 50 million and PhDs from the top schools. But I discussed the basics, which were kept secret, and I brought them out. It was called Project Skyvault. They were using it for propelling spaceships up in the sky. So our initial fleet that Tompkins is talking about that we were putting in space had to be gotten up there somehow. They were building them in Utah. And I actually had a dream, not dream, but a lucid dream where it was in color. And I was watching aircraft carrier-size ships being beamed up with, they had energy beams from projectors underneath them that were lifting them out of their construction facilities into space. And this is actually, later I discovered about Project Skyvault, and this was actually being done.
Did you ever watch Above Majestic on YouTube?
Majestic?
Above Majestic.
Oh, Above Majestic? Maybe not.
Yeah. It's on YouTube. I think it's on Amazon Prime too. You can, and it goes into all of this material.
Mm.
It goes right along with everything you're saying.
Above
and it's got
Majestic.
Tompkins in it. Yeah, it has Tompkins in it too.
I'd be very interested to listen.
Yeah,
he unfortunately passed away.
Yeah.
And what's his name? Working with him, who was editing his book, Bob Wood. He's supposed to come out with 2 sequels that Tompkins wrote, and he was supposed to edit. And I contacted him before COVID, and he still hadn't finished the editing, but he expected it to come out soon. But Bob's getting on in age, and I hope he completes these pretty soon. I found Tompkins' book very interesting. It's really eye-opening.
Yeah, it's this material is out there, and it's fascinating to look at, and you when you think of all of the black ops, all of the underground stuff that underground we don't know about, the secret space program that's been out there for decades, the 20 and release, the term that people serve out there, and then they have their memories wiped and put back on Earth. I mean, there's so much going on that I truly believe is going on, and it's sort of like this show is one of the formats that you put it out there and you say to people, think about this, see what feels right, see what doesn't feel right, because at some point in time, humanity has to, as a whole, embrace where we are going, because we are being kept in the dark ages, and a great deal of our society is out in space already, which is really scary.
Yes. Yeah.
So, but your material goes right along with all of this. So,
which material?
All of the material you're talking about is it dovetails right in with all of this other material, and the more you've been working in isolation, and yet there's so much else going on out there that at some point in time it's all got to come together, because if it doesn't, then we become pieces in a game puzzle, and we don't even know what the game is.
I have gone and given a lot of lectures at conferences about superwaves, of course on other topics too, but a lot on superwaves. But I haven't been to that many science conferences because of the expense. Starburst doesn't have the expense to fund me to go to some of these major science conferences and open the eyes of the scientists, if it's possible to open their eyes. I did manage to go to one in Atlanta, the American Astronomical Society meeting, which is the big conference for astronomers, and presented about the pulsars. And I didn't get criticism, I did get a few questions, but I didn't get rated afterwards with questions, which you would expect for such a incredible statement. But I have a video on my site, on etheric.com, which is from that conference, the presentation, and afterwards I had a table where people were coming up and I was talking to them. But
it's very hard to break through when you stop and think about what you're trying to tell them. It's mind blowing, and
it's
people
paradigm shifting. They're caught in a paradigm, and it's difficult for them to get out of it and really understand what the heck you're saying. That's it.
Exactly.
And I can't take them by the shoulders and shake them.
No, that doesn't work. You can get put in jail for that. No, it's people have to be open to the possibility that there's more out there than they know, and I kind of feel sometimes like I hit my head against a stone wall when I'm trying to talk about consciousness and ascension and transmutation.
Oh, we didn't
and
talk
all of the
about
things.
ascension, did we? Ascension.
Well, that's another show, I guess.
You're near the end. You want me to say what I believe ascension, the effect of the superwave that might trigger ascension? Just in a few words.
You got 4 minutes. Go for it. Sure.
Okay. Well, you know what happened during 9/11 with everyone focused on the Trade Center collapse worldwide. They had their eyes glued to the TV. They say for 3 days the probability around the Earth was changed. They had this way of measuring counting of random number generators. They call them eggs, which would take the eggs to Princeton and analyze the data. And they said for 3 days during and after that event, the probability was shifted. There was non-randomness in the numbers, as if our consciousnesses were affecting those. We were creating a conscious, and everyone felt like spaced out during that period. Talk to people. Imagine now what would happen. Everyone worldwide is glued to Sagittarius A star, the core of the galaxy, the bluish star, which in Hopi legend they call the Saquashaha, which appears brighter than Venus in the sky. And where the Earth is shaking, waves of energy are hitting these heliopause and so on. We're going to go into shock globally and start praying. And not everyone, but a lot of people praying. What this does is it synchronizes the consciousness of everyone. We're all telepathic. We're all connected. But this one event will synchronize everything, global synchronization, so to speak. And we become one for the first time in our lives, or history of the human race, perhaps, or
we become one as a weapon to protect ourselves. That's
well, they
cool.
talk about we would have superhuman capabilities at that point. We could perhaps psychically deflect the cosmic rays to go around the solar system if we wanted to. Is a unity, human unity. And with people praying, we're going to have incredible love vibration coming telepathically to everyone. Everyone who isn't spaced out and running through the streets and not connected to all this, who's meditating and praying, is going to be part of this consciousness shift. And it's going to be a beautiful experience. And I believe that's what's meant in the Bible when they call the coming of the Son of Man. It's not the Son of God they talk about. It's the Son of Man. It's what we create. That higher being of consciousness, of love. And once we create that, if we can maintain that state, that peak experience, it's a Maslowian peak experience of the whole human race, then maybe it will usher the new age. Because everyone will want to recapture that feeling.
Well, that's beautifully put, and you got me right out of time.
Okay.
Thank you so much. This has been a great show. I so thoroughly have enjoyed talking to you. And I'm going to have to read your Pulsar book, and we'll have to talk again real soon.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank
Barbara.
you again.
Okay.
Take care now.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, everybody, thank you for listening. So glad you were with me, and this will be up on YouTube tomorrow. Check back in tomorrow. Mark has a good show, too. This is a good one. Pay attention to it, listen to it, and do check out the book. The book is phenomenal, and I will talk to you soon. Oh, Thursday. I'll be back Thursday with Graham. Graham, I think? Yes. I'll be back Thursday. Check it out. Good night now.